All right, we are live. Welcome to another breach report. We're very excited. We have a special guest, Sumit Vakil, and we're going to be talking about supply chain and what organizations should know about it, what they can do to protect themselves if they're a part of it in any way. And so, Sumit, very excited to have you as a guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here, be a part of this discussion.
Awesome. And let me do a quick introduction on Sumit. He's the chief product officer and co-founder of Resilinc. As a CPO, Sumit is responsible for the product and technology vision, direction, delivery. He has over 25 years experience bringing innovative technologies to the market, and he has served in many leadership roles, both in product and engineering. He's been successfully part of many startups and Fortune 500 companies such as Cisco and Brocade. And he was named in 2022 Pro to Know by Supply and Demand Chain Exec magazine. So that is amazing. And I also, Sumit, I did a Google search on you, and I was impressed to find this is what it said about you. You're one of the world's leading experts in internet data security, and you're a holder of several patents in the area. So it had it right there on Google. I thought that was pretty neat. I wanted to share that. So welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Nice to have you part of the show.
And I'm very excited to be here, and thank you for having me on the show.
So for someone that's listening in that maybe isn't so familiar with supply chain, how would you explain supply chain and just kind of break it down for someone that's kind of new to it? I'm sure we might have some experts listening, but if you were to just say, hey, this is someone that's being introduced to it,
Mhm.
how would you explain that?
Sure. So I think the best way to think about supply chains or to talk about supply chains in this context then would be a manufacturing example. So let's take an automotive industry company, right? Pick any one of the big car companies that you think of. They themselves run manufacturing plants where the cars are assembled. But if you actually look at the components that go into making the car, your entertainment system, the cup holder, even the badge, the company logo that goes on, the tires, the rims, they all come from a variety of different other companies. Right? These are the suppliers that supply those components to the car manufacturer, who then assembles everything together. Now, if you take any one of those suppliers, let's say the supplier that makes the infotainment system, and you open up that infotainment system, it's in a piece of electronics. It's a computer for all practical purposes. It's got a screen, it's got a processor, it's got memory, etc. Each and every single one of those components also comes from another set of suppliers. You take any one of those chips now, you open it up, the ingredients that go into making the chips, those come from a whole set of other suppliers. The wafer fabrication that goes into making a chip, the cutting of the wafer, the packaging, the testing, all goes through a whole host of different suppliers worldwide. When you think of supply chains, think of it that way. The company that you, as a consumer or as an organization, might be buying from is the one that's selling to you, yes, but they are also dependent on all these thousands of suppliers, whether they do business with them directly or those suppliers are deeper in the supply chain. All that coming together is your global supply chain.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So thanks for breaking that down. Now, tell us a little bit about your company that you helped co-found, and where does it fit into the supply chain, and what services and products is it offering to help supply chains out?
Okay. So Resilinc is the market leader in supply chain resiliency and risk management solutions. So we provide software and data that enable our customers to build supply chains that are resilient to disruptions. So let me back up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Our CEO and co-founder, Bindia, she's a supply chain risk expert by the way of MIT and Cisco.
Wow.
Back
So
in
yeah, that's a pedigree.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong category. And before that, also, she spent a number of years in supply chain at companies like Broadcom and Flextronics, Solectron back then, which got acquired. Now, back in 2010, she had this vision of making global supply chains resilient, sustainable, fair, and secure. And we came together, we translated her vision into Resilinc. And, like I was saying, we provide software and data solutions that enable companies to build robust and sustainable supply chains.
Go-
What's really interesting about how we did it is we built this network of networks of manufacturing companies. So think social network, but for supply chains. Companies that join our network, they can securely share data with their customers or their suppliers. Now, leveraging the data that their suppliers may provide, they themselves input, Resilinc provides, our partners provide, and using the decision-making systems that we have implemented, companies are now able to quantify risks in their supply chains, proactively mitigate them, and equally importantly, put the right people and processes in place. So should a supply chain disruption actually happen, they are there, they're able to mitigate it. And ultimately, what they achieve is revenue protection, customer sat improvement, um, brand protection, and also we help them control costs in terms of expedite ship and inventory management as well.
Excellent. So with this network, I like how you that illustration of the social network. So if I'm getting this right, if I'm reliant on my supply chain, but now my supply chain is broken for a reason, I can then find another supply chain source a lot easier and quicker.
Correct. In fact, what we actually advise our customers to do is not wait till the disruption happens, but take advantage of the analytics of the risk quantification in the multi-tier supply chain and proactively take action. So if you see a supplier that has higher risk, let's say they have a higher risk because of where they are, geographically located. Maybe it's high
Right.
hurricane risk, maybe it's a geopolitical risk, then take action today and quantify an alternate supplier. Qualify an alternate supplier, establish business relationships with them, start giving them some business so you are well positioned should your primary supplier go down, you have an alternate that can take over.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes me, for some reason, I'm thinking of sriracha sauce because they were off the shelves for so long because they couldn't get the peppers. They probably should have had some alternate sources of the chili pepper that they needed long before the sriracha sauce wasn't available. I don't know if you saw that, but sriracha sauce was
Yes.
going for like $100 on eBay and stuff. It was crazy.
Yes, one of my favorite condiments. It was tough those few months.
Yeah, yeah. I think they're back on the shelves. I think I saw them back on the shelves, but no
Yeah,
doubt
yeah,
they're probably. I can't even imagine how many millions of dollars were lost
yeah,
due to that thing that happened there with
yeah.
their supplier. So let me ask you, because cybersecurity is such a big thing in the landscape, and obviously we're in the cybersecurity space. We're always trying to look ahead. Supply chain and cyber attacks. Can you tell a little bit of more information on what you've seen in the industry from cybersecurity risk? Have there been any outages? What's going on with cybersecurity in the supply chain world?
Yeah. So let me start with a couple of things, hacks that had happened recently to kind of set the context of what is possible. Right. Unfortunately, what is possible with supply chains. So let's start with February of last year. So in February of 2022, you can look this up. Kojima Industries. So Kojima Industries is a Toyota supplier in Japan. They were hit by a cyber attack. It was ransomware, and they were shut down. And because of the way Toyota suppliers connect to it, right? Toyota has this very famous Kanban system of manufacturing. So their suppliers are all directly connected to Toyota. The supplier goes down, it's not able to provide the components that Toyota procures from them. So 14 different Toyota plants across Japan shut down for an entire day. That impacted the production of 13,000 automobiles. Think about that, right? If you even assume like $1,000, per car as a Toyota's profit, we're immediately looking at a $13 million hit right there one day. More recently, just in August, Clorox, they got hit by a cybersecurity a breach as well, right? And now they are reporting that they expect a 23 to 28% decrease in net sales at the end of Q3. A
Wow.
1/4%, right? A 1/4% decrease in net sales. So this is the kind of impact that supply chain disruptions because of cybersecurity can cause to your manufacturing and hence to your to your revenue and customer sat.
That's huge. And I would imagine that a company like Toyota or Clorox, it might put the relationship in a rocky place after that happened, because they suffered financial consequences from that supplier, and now they may say, hey, we might need to look at some alternatives, or maybe we want you guys to offset the cost of our loss in some way on our next negotiation. I would just imagine those type of conversations are happening.
For sure, right? When supply chain organizations are assessing suppliers, right, whether it's to do business with them for the first time or whether they are renewing contracts, a whole host of parameters go into assessing that supplier's performance. Quality, pricing, those are the more traditional metrics, but certainly things like on-time delivery, also a traditional metric. Supplier reliability, increasingly, suppliers' ability to continue, delivery of the committed material under stress, right? Disruptions and so on. All of those are factors that are assessed, are used to assess a supplier performance and hence award them business. So companies that are not paying attention, or companies that are paying attention but have a cybersecurity breach for whatever reason, they do tend to lose business.
Yeah, I see that. We recently had a customer that reached out to us because they were getting, it wasn't Toyota, but it was another very large competitor of Toyota. And they were just the attorney, they were just the law firm representing that automobile manufacturer. And that automobile manufacturer had such stringent requirements for them to even represent their case, because they had sensitive data. And that kind of set the law firm into motion, making sure they had everything in place to even be allowed to do business. And I would imagine that's only going to keep getting more and more stringent in the supply chain world. They're not even part of the supply chain, but in a sense, they are a trusted vendor that's, working with large manufacturing. I could only imagine what they're going to start having to do with the organizations that are actually supplying them components that they need.
Yeah, and this is such a fantastic example of what the consequence of a breach could be. Yes, you could have your manufacturing shut down, but like in the case of the law firm, you could also have IP leakage. You could have intellectual property that either you as a manufacturing organization own or one of your customers has entrusted you with it. So whether it's a manufacturing or a direct supplier, or whether it's an indirect supplier like a services provider like a law firm, your supply chain could also end up causing an intellectual property issue for you.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, as organizations are trying to strengthen their cybersecurity posture, and let's say they're part of that supply chain, what are things they could do to better their risk score, for example? So you're scoring risk on a lot of different factors. What are some areas that they could be doing to give them a lower risk and therefore more likely to win business and more likely not to lose it once they have it? Because I would imagine if I'm a small business owner and I finally get that big contract, the last thing I ever want to do is lose that contract.
Yeah. So it comes down to this, right? You have to be able to demonstrate to your customer that you have a robust supply chain, and you have robust cybersecurity practices. You also, in addition to that, and look, we know this, right? If you're going to try and do business with a company, they're going to make you fill out these cybersecurity assessments. Great. Some companies are more diligent about it, and they'll make you refresh them more often. Some will make you refresh them only at the time of contract renewal. But regardless, the first thing I would say to a small vendor or a large vendor even is just be proactive and be clear about your cybersecurity practices. If you have already identified areas of improvement, start working on them. Don't wait for something to happen before you address them. So first and foremost, do your own housekeeping, bring your own cybersecurity practices under control. And by the way, since you're a manufacturing organization, don't just focus on your IT assets. Your OT, your operational technologies assets are equally important, and more likely they are going to be needing more attention. Now that you've got your house in order, that's not sufficient though. You have to start looking at your own suppliers as well, because you may be okay, but if your supplier is disrupted, you're going to be disrupted, so you're not going to supply your customer. So here is where your IT diligence comes in, right? Your OT diligence comes in. It is not sufficient to collect data from your suppliers once every contract renewal cycle. I mean, if you're setting up a 3 to 5 year contract, so much can change during that time, right? So bring in technologies that can help you automate the collection of cybersecurity practices data from your suppliers. Those traditional spreadsheets and documents that we have our vendors fill out as IT diligence, go beyond that, right? You bring in a system, and you can look at some of the examples Resilinc has as well, but bring in a system that will let you easily quantify, all right, where the gaps in the supplier cybersecurity practices are. Chances are you're dealing with hundreds of suppliers. You can't go after every single supplier. You need to be able to prioritize. So a system like that helps you quickly identify areas of improvement in your supplier's cyber practices and lets you prioritize based on your business goals. So maybe that supplier has a disproportionately large impact on your revenue. Maybe they are holding some really sensitive IP for you. Those are the suppliers you want to prioritize first. Go after them, help them, work with them, right? This is not about yanking the business from them and going to someone else. It is very much a cooperative thing in supply chain. Help them improve their practices, their processes, make them robust, and ultimately you're the ones who are going to gain from it. So to summarize, take care of your own business first and immediately look at your suppliers, help them get better. You've already taken the first two important steps. And then as as you see more maturity on your supplier side, then start working with them to go to their suppliers and then their suppliers and so on. So as deep as you can go in the supply chain.
That makes a lot of sense. I like the systematic approach. Tell me a little bit, how did you get into this business? I love the business side of it as well as the cyber side. And what was the driving factor as you kind of grew your career to this point?
So for me, it's been a pretty interesting kind of journey. I'm going to date myself here, but I started my career as a programmer working on remote access systems. Some of you may have heard of the company, US Robotics. You may remember those modems that made noise, right? So I used to work on those chassis that went into, here's another legacy term, internet service providers is, NOTs. So that's where I started. This was back in Chicago in the early 90s. Then Silicon Valley came calling, and I worked on some of the early VPN gateways, on some of the early IPsec standards, and I even looked at Skipjack and a bunch of other stuff. But really, in the late 90s, I worked on some of those early VPN gateway systems. Then I kind of transitioned into fixed wireless. We were solving for the last mile problem, then into enterprise wireless, and then ultimately, I co-founded Resilinc. I worked mostly through startups. I did spend some time at Cisco where I ended up through an acquisition. But the startups have always been my passion, and this idea was just too good to not go after.
I love that. Yeah, I I love the feeling of a startup. It's just there's so much exciting about it. I still feel like we're a startup in a lot of ways, even though we're 11 years and not necessarily
Yeah.
considered a startup. Like we're in such hyper growth mode that as a company is expanding, they're always hitting ceilings that they have to break through, and
Yep.
creating new processes, building new relationships, new partnerships, having to do different new things. And
Yeah.
I find it so exciting.
Yeah, everything you said there, I was like, I can identify with every single thing here. We've been in business for 13 years, but and yeah, we're also not considered a startup anymore. But every single day, it's like, let's break down this problem, right? Let's go solve for this. Here's something new we can do. It's just amazing. It's a lot of fun.
It's great. It's great. Now, what is the ideal customer profile for you as you're kind of expanding, obviously in the supply chain, but what's kind of on the small end, on the large end? Is there a certain niche you're looking for? Is it really any kind of manufacturing or supply chain participant?
Yeah.
What's the ideal area?
So while our software is very standard and applies across industries without any modification, so you could have a high tech company and you could also have a CPG company use our software without any modifications. Our company level focus though is on a set of ICPs, and we're very laser focused on them. So high tech, automotive, and heavy machinery. Pharmaceuticals, medical devices, aerospace and defense, and increasingly the US federal government. The common theme across all of these industries for us is large organizations, complex supply chains that are global, and overlap of supply chains within industries and across our ICPs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I know there was a lot of people never even really thought about supply chain until COVID, and then there was supply chain issues, and then all of a sudden it was on everybody's mind, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Man, what is going on? Why can't I get, basic products that they just take for granted that are always there?" And I feel that a lot of people started thinking about it differently, and business
Mhm.
owners certainly should probably think about it differently on making sure they're able to manage that risk and do what they need to make sure they're delivering for their customers, whoever that might be in the chain.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
we have seen a transformation, right? Between 2010 and end of 2019, it was very much an education that we would do with customers. But now the mindset in corporations has changed. The initiatives are coming tops down for risk management and risk mitigation from the board level down, as opposed to, in the old days when somebody who had dealt with it before or felt the pain of a disruption tried to bring it into the organization. So that mindset change has happened. I think organizations have understood that supply chain disruptions are not an if anymore, but more of a when. They're also understanding now that those so-called black swan events, the ones that happen once in a while, once in a lifetime, things are no longer black swan because they happen all the time.
Yeah.
Right? We started with the pandemic, then the Russians invaded Ukraine, right? And that caused an enormous amount of damage to infrastructure that was critical to so many industries. Hurricanes are getting bigger, stronger. The season lasts longer. It's just endless.
Yeah, it is. I feel the same way with the cyber breach. It used to be that we were doing so much education. I almost was thinking, man, we got into the business too early because I felt like we were constantly educating. And I heard from a mentor not too long ago. He's like, if I'm allergic to any business that requires you to educate the customer. I was like, man, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I guess unfortunately, but now I feel probably the same way you do. People are starting to
Yeah.
recognize, just like supply chain, the world's in chaos with war, other political things, natural disasters. and certainly cybersecurity. At this point, it's not even if there's going to be a data breach, it's going to be when. We see that with our existing customers. They have data breaches all the time, and they have even the ones with the best security stacks. And then it's just a matter of having that amazing team that's able to respond and get it out and, you know, take the actions. I'm sure it's exactly like that with the supply chain. You know, cybersecurity is a component of that. There's all these other risks completely compounding it. You need to have those relationships. You need to have that network of strong partnerships that you're able and plans and backup plans to keep the business moving forward. Because like you said, in the example of Clorox or Toyota, and those are probably some of the bigger examples, but if you're a smaller company, you know, that it might not be as big monetarily hit, but percentage wise of your revenue, it might be just as big. The impact can be just as bad, and the destruction of the business is just as catastrophic.
Yeah. And here's one thing that most companies don't get, right? Whether you're a small company, large company, you have a cyber breach, your manufacturing shuts down, your customers might actually move on from you. If you are shut down for a longer period of time, and research has shown this, right? The impact to your business is not temporary, it is actually multi-year. So imagine a situation where you're down and your customer has to find a new supplier, and they sign a 3-year contract with that new supplier. You're out of luck for 3 years now. So that impact is no longer for a few days or weeks or what have you. It's going to be ongoing for you. And imagine the consequences to your brand. This is a cyber breach you are talking about, right? It's not like, okay, we had a flood, we can't do anything about it or couldn't have done anything about it. It's a cyber breach.
Yeah, that's huge. So there's a company, we do a lot in the post-acute space outside of the hospital, any kind of healthcare. We do a lot of work in there. And there's one company I'm thinking of. They had spent years marketing, being in, the magazines, being at the events, and they had grown their business very large. And they had also, it was also a ransomware. It shut down. They were doing cloud infrastructure hosting for their customers, and all their customers went down. All the data was lost, not even recoverable. I don't even know how they survived that event, but they have survived it. But now their name's like a dirty word, right? Their brand, who's going to want to go there? They can, tell a story of how they've improved things. But I would think if I was an owner of a business, there'd be no way that I would ever want to take that risk.
Yeah. Completely agree. As much as we talk about these IT hacks, it's the OT side of it. If you were to ask me what keeps me awake at night, that's what really is of concern, right? All the control systems that go into the shop floors, the warehouses, distribution centers, so much of it is so old. So much of it, and again, we also hear this, right? Oh yeah, I have an air gap between my IT and OT systems. Come on. We know that's not the case always. And, those traditional honeypot attacks can easily help you cross over between that gap if that gap even was there in the first place. The problem with those control systems is, yes, a hacker could lock them up for profit, but also you could have a situation where, because they control physical systems, you could create, the hacker could actually cause physical harm. And that's a big issue, right? You could actually, cause physical harm to a factory, shutting it down for a long period. Worse, you could actually impact health for people who work at the factory and people around the factory.
Man, definitely something to think about. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on it. It was a great conversation. How do people, if they want to follow up with you, where can they find you? Where can they connect with you?
So you can go to our company website, www.resilinc.com. you want to talk to me personally, my email address is svakil, svakil @resilinc.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sumit. And I look forward to many more conversations and staying in contact with you.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much for having me on your show. I had a great time today.
Awesome. Me too. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.